if I were a younger man, slash in my prime of wanting to compete in as much Pokemon as possible, I would be all over Gen 8 OU. It's one of my favorite tiers to spectate. And I think part of what I like about it is the stuff that has given it a reputation as being boring. I think that reputation is kind of going away nowadays. Since people have shown that you can run very aggressive teams very effectively. So it's not just necessarily regen and boots and, the vortex of switch moves and the games go on for a million years. Obviously that can be the case, but it's not like you have no option. I think that was also partially post-generational pushback against it. Where a lot of people were like, oh, thank God I don't have to play that anymore, and now I can move on to Gen 9. Because there are some players who play the current gen because it's the current gen, not because it's a metagame they like, as opposed to, people who play old gens because, they love those old gens, not just because, well, it's what the most people are playing. I was one of those people, believe it or not, way back in the day. I didn't play Gen 5 OU in the current gen because I was like, I love this metagame. I was like, well, I gotta play this fucking tier. But yeah, I think Gen 8 OU has a better reputation now. But in general, the overall opinion that was prominent for however long, slash probably still is, was the idea that it was a boring tier. Because there's no generational gimmick. I think that wasn't really said out loud, but that's what I felt was being said, especially coming off of Gen 7, where people had not just Megas in Gen 6, but Megas and Z moves. And Gen 7 OU is a great metagame, but whenever someone would question the health of Z moves in the tier, which I think was very fair to question, then you would have, this is a real post that was made on the forums, you would have people chiming into competitive discussions going, oh, well, I like Z moves. The nuke option makes games more exciting. And I was like, okay, so what does that have to do with the competitive side? Oh, nothing? Okay. Well, if that's how you put it. But yeah, so people will look at Gen 8, and with Dynamax getting banned very, very quickly, and go, there's nothing here. Why would I, what's the interest? And this kind of goes into the idea I expressed in some recent video. I've been making a lot. I don't remember which one. But the idea that a lot of people have a very surface level enjoyment of Pokemon. And it was probably when I was talking about the people who like to watch from the sidelines but don't seem to really be interested in the intricacies of the game, and their greatest enjoyment is not the game itself, but then talking about it afterwards on Discord, which is not so bad if the discussion wasn't just comparing the numbers on the sheet. And following that kind of logic, you look at games that have, cool, exciting moments and generational gimmicks, like a Big Terra, for example, or a Mega, or a Z move, or, in Gen 7 you can mix both of them together. Those are, big, exciting, flashy things. And Gen 8 does not really have that kind of thing. Yeah, it has its big hitters, but they don't seem nearly as impressive. I mean, even something like Tapu Lele doesn't hit as hard as in Gen 7 because of the Psychic Terrain nerf. So, I think that a lot of what appeals to me about Gen 8 is that it feels like a very competitive generation. Now, take my words here with a grain of salt, because I am just an enthusiastic spectator of the tier. But I haven't really seen... Listen, if a metagame is unbalanced, the player base of that tier will usually be the first to tell you. But I haven't seen any complaints from not just the player base, but also the spectators, like, oh, this is so broken, or if there is some sort of development in Gen 8, like, I don't know, people are complaining about Weavile again, then I would love to know about that. But for those who But as far as I know, there's not much, and it is a pleasant, balanced metagame. And a lot of people, and I made this video before called the Gen 8 OU controversy or something like that, and it's like, well, it's very balanced, but is it exciting? And for me, it is exciting, not in the surface level way, but to really dig into a game. I don't even mean like dig into it, like hyper analyzing every single turn that happens. But I mean, just like watching it go by, I find it a very pleasant form of Pokemon. It doesn't try to overdo any. Well, I'm getting into kind of like abstract art description territory here, so I'll hold myself back. But basically, I find Gen 8 OU to be a strangely pure form of Pokemon that I enjoy. And I wonder how much of this is just good mechanics, like the weakening of the terrains, for example, or and how much of it is just the lack of generation. And I think the lack of generational mechanic is obviously huge. Because Dynamax is one of the most crazy things ever, and then Mega Dynamax comes around in Gen 9. That's not really accurate to call it that, but it's pretty nuts. And I haven't been following the Terra controversy closely in Gen 9, and obviously there are going to be people who will defend something no matter how broken. There were people who defended Dynamax. There were people, so there are going to be people who would have Rayquaza thrown into OU and be like, oh, it's not that bad. Stealth Rock, Ice Weakness, etc. Habanberry on your Dragon types. But yeah, and then there are people who will obviously go, oh well, Terra is ridiculous. Team preview like in VGC. Stuff like that, and nothing will happen because I don't know. I personally think that it's that from my outsider perspective, that not dealing with Terra in some form is definitely like a PR thing more than a competitive thing. But again, take my words with a grain of salt. But I have also observed that phenomenon a lot in the past. Like there were times in Gen 6, for example, where people were opposing a baton pass ban because there have been too many bans already and it's bad for PR. Like that's again, that was a genuine forum post. So that really makes me appreciate that we didn't decide to tolerate Dynamax, and we had pretty much the entire generation flawed as though it was for a lot of its duration. Well, we had an entire generation without it. And I think that Gen 8's focus on, I don't want to say like pure Pokemon or traditional Pokemon, because that kind of implies that, something like Gen 6 or 7 is lesser for having this kind of generational mechanic. And I definitely don't believe that. I think those are also great metagames. But I like the lack of, well, it's not so much a generational mechanic because, I guess if you're going strictly by definition, because every generation brings something to the table, right? But I think of it as the generational gimmick insofar as it's this huge mechanic thrown in for the purpose of really, jazzing up the power level. Like a Mega is going to do that, a Z-Move is going to do that, Terra is going to do that, obviously Dynamax is going to do that. Like, even Gen 5 with the Weather Wars and everything going crazy, I don't think of them as really, those aren't mechanics, Politoed didn't get Drizzle as part of I guess technically did, but you can tell the difference, right? And I'm trying to, I have a late New Year's resolution to not get involved in pedantry and debating this kind of thing when its meaning is made very obvious. So, can the music play, please? Using Zame remixes as always, I love them. So, yeah, I kind of wonder how Gen 9 would be without Terra. I mean, everyone wonders that, obviously. I don't know if there's been any tests to it, but I really like I like how without the generational mechanic, exacerbating things in Gen 8, then I don't know. I mean, there are things I'm not crazy about in Gen 8, like the lack of pursuit. I don't think that was a good change, but ultimately, I like what it is very much. It's a very unique metagame because it's such a relatively new generation. I say relatively because Gen 10 is on the horizon, ish. But to be so far along and yet have such a balanced power level, especially sandwiched between the Terra Gen and the Mega Z Move Gen. I mean, God, it doesn't even have hidden power. It feels positively tame. So I really like that it's so developed, quote unquote. Not to consider earlier gens underdeveloped. I would be the last person to say that. But developed insofar as it has all these mechanics that are supposedly updates. Like, oh, steel shouldn't resist ghost and dark, which we can still debate that one. But yeah, I like the very methodical form of what Gen 8 reminds me of. It reminds me of these times in Aura. This in a roundabout way, it reminds me of GSC. Well, it both directly reminds me of GSC in the more prolonged long game that has to be played when you've got things like boots interfering with hazards, which obviously GSC doesn't have. But with one layer of spikes max, then your hazard is not. It's going to take a while before you can really start making use of it. But yeah, and it reminds me kind of Oris. It reminds me of GSC through Oris, if that makes sense. Because there were times where the playstyle of Oris, when the metagame was in this like bulky offense versus bulky offense haven in 2018. Think back to the time when CBB and Blunder were playing in SPL. I have a video on it if you'd like to check it out in action. And the games that were being played there, the teams that were being used then I found it very reminiscent of GSC in a strange way. I don't think anyone else saw it that way, so I felt a little crazy about it. But yeah, and Gen 8 kind of strikes that similar urge, and it reminds me of GSC through Oris because obviously there's a lot more direct power, but in that way, that's what makes it such an interesting mix to me, and why the metagame is so fascinating, because you have this huge level of strength, but you've got this really kind of you have to take all these really roundabout routes to make the most of that strength, to translate that strength into tangible progress. I think that makes sense. So yeah, this is just another video that I'm throwing together quickly because I came home very late from work and I'm very tired, and I am keeping an eye on my food in the oven. And I would like to watch a movie and go to sleep at a reasonable hour. So yeah, this is just kind of a Gen 8 OU appreciation video. Let me go check on I'll pop on another replay. I'll check on the food. And actually, hay burner. Oh, these. And what I also like about Gen 8 OU, especially as time goes on and it becomes more appreciated, it is a great player base. Like there have been times where GSC or DPP or whatever, they've always been great metagames, but sometimes the player base just isn't there. It takes a while for new players to come in, the old players leave, or a whole bunch of stuff happens. But right now, the Gen 8 OU player base is really, really cool, really interesting. Like, I don't know who Chris P. Bacon is, like, personally, but every time I've seen him play, I'm just like, this guy really, brings it. Hayburner is a great player for a long time. I recognize him. Damien the Genius, Ox the Fox. I mean, these are, really great players. To say nothing of Sakri, one of my favorite players, since Gen 7. I don't know how you say this guy's name. Gotcha. I assume you just say gotcha and there's no O. But yeah, I know he's a great player. All these guys are really, really good. So yeah, let me just go check on my food real quick. All right, we got a few more minutes. So, yeah, Heatran runs Flame Body in this gen. I know why, because contact punishing is good, but it's surreal to see it take damage from fire moves. I also like that this gen actually makes use of Heal Bell, because Kartana gets punished by Zapdos Static, or Weavile Knockoff gets punished by Heatran Flame Body, things like that. And then you can actually use Defensive Dragonite. Because of boots, and you can slap Heal Bell on it, or I think people use Heal Bell Clef too, but it actually works much more consistently than Cleric Support and other gens. Of course, the 3 preceding gens also have a lot of Poison Heal Gliscor, so there's not a lot of demand in healing your own Gliscor, especially when it becomes the thing that you use to take knockoff. And in Gen 4, then there's not a lot of Heal Bell because the Strange History of Heal Bell, that's a video. Did I just see Kartana? Whoa, what happened? But I wasn't really paying attention to the replay because I was thinking. So did this? That was really something. Okay, I mean, so for those of you who are listening to this as opposed to watching, I value you very much, first of all. And second of all, so what happened is this Blacephalon came in, and it used Overheat. It was the thing that was doing fire damage to the Flame Body Heatran earlier. And Chris P. Bacon switched Kartana into it, obviously as a sacrifice. And the first Overheat missed. It's like, okay, whatever. Then the second Overheat missed. And also Kartana is paralyzed, but it breaks through the full paralysis and knockoff KO's Blacephalon. Wow, that was horrifying. So, yeah, I mean, Pokemon is Pokemon in every gen, obviously. But, that was really, really something. It's funny to think about how I saw this phrase the other day. Someone said that paralysis basically makes all your moves 75% accurate at best. And as soon as I read that, I was like, we got to ban this status immediately. And I thought of that just now because, that Kartana just hit a 75% accurate move. Anyway, I also, another cool little thing about Gen 8 I really like? I like that CBT-Tar is just good because, not because it pursues things, but just because it's a wall breaker. Like, it's a shame that it can't pursue, obviously, but I do like that about it. I think it's a very cool Pokemon. And I just generally dig the play style of Gen 8 OU. It fits. If I were to play an SPL again, I would try to take up a new metagame. I think I would play Gen 8 because I like that you can. I like the tempo of the game. I think it fits my preference for the game, and I think it's very skill intensive. Metagame knowledge intensive and skill intensive. I don't think you can really fluke your way to victory too easily. There doesn't seem to be that kind of thing that you can. I mean, I'm sure I'm very wrong in this regard. I'm sure that someone was going to say, actually, if you just click right with Alola Ninetales Hail, then Arctozolt, then you might just fluke your way to victory. Or, Melmetal is broken or whatever. But, in a broad sense, then I think it's. I guess this kind of goes for every tier, so I'm really more fascinated with it in Gen 8 than I would be in other generations because of my outsider perspective. And I know, once you get close up to metagames, then you'll have other things you complain about, like, oh my god, every team needs to have this because of that. But I like the measured pace of it. And again, that's why I like the lack of generational gimmick, because obviously you can go very fast and aggressive with your teams if you like, but you also can slow things down reasonably, or go all the way. But I think that sweet spot, it's the kind of place where a lot of the best players have tended to gravitate over the years, over the generations, over the metagames, and that's where the most satisfying Pokemon comes for me, where you can. Where you're not rushing through a game, but it's not going to be a 600 turn stall fest either. because I think a lot of those tend to simplify the game. So when you have that sweet spot, that's when you're really getting into the interesting kind of thinking that makes for a lot of the best games. And to go back to 2018 Auras, for example, a lot of games at that time, they were bulky offense versus bulky offense. I think I covered a lot of them on my channel, like updated Kanto versus Hai. I think is in the Pokemon's Greatest Battles playlist if you want to check that out. They had 2 games that season. And the one I covered, I remember it was a bulky offense versus bulky offense game. Plenty of aggression and power on both sides. And, they were lengthy games. And people would even refer to them casually, like, oh, solid 60-turn game, 70-turn game, 90-turn game. GSC lengthwise, but, obviously there was a lot more power going on. But, the power thing is fine if you can still slow the game down reasonably. And I think Gen 8 OU really has that sweet spot. Again, from my outside perspective. Maybe one day I'll jump in and renounce it fully or pronounce it my favorite metagame. Who's to say? I did play Gen 8 OU in the early Crown Tundra. Yeah, and I was pretty decent at it actually. I had a pretty good team. But that's not about what this is about. Yeah. So I like the more measured style of Pokemon, and it's what draws me to GSC. It's what draws me to settled metagames in general. Peng was saying this the other day in Gen 5 OU, like, a metagame is only stable as a metagame if everyone agrees to respect it. Because when someone decides, no, I don't agree, and they just go full chaos, that's the most scary. When you can't. And there's that old bit of wisdom where someone will say, oh, a random is much scarier than, a good player, because you generally know what you're getting with a good player. Randoms are, of course this wound up being a famous Blue quote during the Style Saga. More foreshadowing for the upcoming, Perfect Blue version 2. Yeah, so I really like the Gen 8 balance between, you have your giant choiced wall breakers, but you've also got plenty of defensive play. And, a lot of the time the defensive play with, the Boots Future Port kind of stuff, that tends to be the more disliked, I guess. But I don't know. From the Gen 8 OU, I watched this season of SPL. I did not really observe that kind of, brainless vortex spamming at all. So, yeah, I remember I even jumped on the SPL semis tiebreak with Blunder on his channel if you want to watch it. Lax was there too, and I was mostly in the background for the Gen 8, but I like Ox's team here. This is my kind of Pokemon. And obviously, Behe's running some great hyper offense, but and obviously he's got an amazing alt name with a reference to perhaps David Lynch's best. But yeah, also obviously Gen 8 OU is a tier where you can very viably use Blaziken, so I'm biased for that reason. But yeah, so this is not really the point of this video, and we're going to wrap it up because I should probably go to keep an eye on my food. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. This is really just kind of some musing. But yeah, lack of generational gimmick, good. Get rid of Terra. I wonder what happens if you get rid of Terra. And obviously, Gen 10 is bringing the Megas back, as far as I'm aware. So, I mean, hey, I'm a fan of Megas, and I think I even, campaigned for them before in a video at some point. It's somewhere in there in my memory. But, yeah, I do like Gen 8 for its kind of singular presence for what it is. So, yes, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.